For North America, cops are in the news because they are the story. I'm Molly Thomas in Erbil, Iraq. They were telling us about the days just after the attack. The fear levels were just so high. Bloomberg, Fox, New York Times, Politico, they all went with Clinton at least 3 points ahead. Al-Shabaab is still looking to occupy territory just 5 kilometers from that Syrian-Turkish border. That was metric. Of course, it's still electric down here. An emergency meeting this morning. That storm, it hit hard and it hit strong. Yes. So it just came out in the last hour. We are watching, of course, that number on the bottom of your screen. Electoral college votes right now sitting at 136 to 104 for Donald Trump. Again, you have to get 270 to seal the deal for the next president of the United States. They're talking about the severity of that storm. So just exactly how strong those winds were, how it felt in the buildings they were in as they were swaying, as they were indoors. You can see in the video just the impact of what that wind looked like. You know, in that post it says that in his last moments he was with his family, John, following that long battle with dementia. And for fans, I mean, they know that in 2014 he actually took a temporary leave of absence from the band because of dementia. And so this is something that's been plaguing him for some time. But if you really think of the amazing success of AC/DC, you really have to credit Malcolm for a lot of that. He wrote the band's material and came up with many of the biggest riffs in that guitar riffs that everyone knows around the world. And the people that, you know, that don't know, he was born in Scotland. His family emigrated to Australia. Him and his brother started this band. And they actually got the name, I don't know if you know this, John, AC/DC. Their sister saw it on a sewing machine, and it stood for alternating current, direct current. And that was the energy that they felt it brought, right? And so, you know, since then, they've been inducted into the Hall of Fame. They've sold more than 70 million copies. In the US alone, 200 million albums worldwide. An incredible success story, a lot of it because of Malcolm.
In Sutherland Springs, Molly, what do you have for us?
Lorna, unfortunately, our team at Context has covered too many of these tragedies. You know, I think back to the pain in Paris in 2015. I remember the shock of Quebec after that mosque attack. And just recently, I mean, Sheldon speaking to survivors after Las Vegas. But this one is different. This is not a big concert venue. It is not a crowded school or even a big city. This is small town Bible Belt, USA, and that drastically changes the story. Sunday, November 5th took so much from Sutherland Springs. Life, laughter, obscurity, and innocence. 8 of the 26 victims were under the age of 16.
This was not racially motivated. It wasn't over religious beliefs. There was a domestic situation going on within the family and the in-laws.
While motivation for mass murder is still unknown, the incident happened in a place of worship, a place that residents call the bedrock of their town. Sutherland will never be the same for neighbors Kathleen and Fred Curnow. They were the first ones to call 911.
When this started, we were in the bedroom, but I just can't be in the bedroom. You know, it's almost an anxiety, and I start hearing the shots and the rhythm.
I mean, you felt it very, very close to home.
It sounded like it was in my home.
Bullets hit their car and even ricocheted off of their home. At one point, the shooter aimed directly at their property after a Good Samaritan, as they call him, rushed to their yard armed to stop him.
Actually, he just used my truck to steady himself and shoot at the guy.
Nightmares of that day are affecting them physically. The couple is struggling to sleep and even eat. You folks are right across the street. Are you going to stay? The security teams have really been planning since Tuesday's attack, just a new security plan. You have local and statewide teams as well as federal teams coming in to make sure that this marathon goes off without a hitch. So here's a few of the big details that we know in terms of security. So there are double the normal aerial surveillance teams out there this morning. That means that there are snipers on rooftops as well as in helicopters. As well, there is triple the number of national military personnel on the ground. There's also officers that are going to be in plain clothes patrolling the area around that race. And the largest ever contingent of sand trucks and blocker vehicles along that 42-kilometer stretch. So it is a massive area that these teams are covering. Now, this is a 42-kilometer race, of course, but it's unique in that it goes across many different bureaus. So I'll give you an idea. of exactly where the racers are going to be. They're going to go through hot spots like Brooklyn, like Queens, like Manhattan.
Molly Thomas shows us what happened next. Molly, let's talk about this conversation and how it started.
Yes, so Minister McKenna had just wrapped up environment meetings in Vancouver, and she was talking to the press, and a question came in from a Rebel Media reporter. And of course, Rebel Media is a website that was founded by conservative activist Ezra Levant. And basically McKenna was saying, stop calling me nicknames. I don't want to answer your questions if you won't acknowledge that. And she gets quite personal in her response. Take a listen.
So can I get a commitment from you that you will not use that hashtag and not use that name in your articles?
John, that is just 40 seconds of that exchange. So again, that went on for about a minute, back and forth, back and forth. A lot of what we see in the U.S., but not here often in Canada.
So, Molly, has there been any response from Rebel Media on this so far?
Well, we reached out this morning. We have not got an official response as of yet, but it's important to note that when you look on their Twitter page, you can actually see 4 tweets since this incident, all with the hashtag Climate Barbie still there. Also, Christopher Wilson is who McKenna was talking to in that press conference. He's a reporter, and he put out 5 fiery tweets. Here's the focus point of those. He says, in Canada, journalists do not need the editorial approval of politicians before asking them questions at government press conferences. He also went on to say, our Rebel Alberta chief coined the phrase Climate Barbie, a reference to McKenna's shallowness. She did not disprove that tonight. There's also a reaction out there, John, around McKenna's side. There are women that are tweeting this morning saying, hey, thank you for standing up. When you do that, it's easier for us to stand up against sexism.
So are our federal leaders saying anything about this?
That's the big question right now. So we are waiting to see if there's any more response to this. We know that this was a heated topic in the House of Commons. Just in September, you may remember, former Saskatchewan Minister Jerry Ritz had actually used that exact same term about McKenna in a tweet. He had since apologized, said he was sorry for that. And the Conservative Party had said, hey, we don't want to stand with that type of rhetoric either. So will federal leaders weigh into this one? They're probably waking up, John. We'll have to wait and see.
Thanks, Molly.
You're welcome.
Not only Saskatchewan, but the West is a tough political playground for the Liberals. How do you target seniors, your voters, the people that are constantly going to the polls that perhaps may be set in a conservative mindset?
Well, I think one of the things that we're seeing is people are a lot less branded to particular parties than they once were.
Let's quickly touch on your abortion stance. I mean, you want your MPs to all vote pro-choice. Mm-hmm. Isn't that impeding on their freedom of thought, their freedom of belief, their freedom of opinion, some of those values that your father brought into the charter?
We have 17 children. It's terrible.
17 children lost their father?
Mohammed Libidi's quiet neighborhood is lined with tears. The cards in the snow tell a story no one ever wanted to hear. 6 men gunned down at their local place of worship. Another 3 are still in intensive care. This is Canada's first physical attack on people of faith.
This is a rare case. This is not a general feeling.
The attack at Quebec City's Islamic Center has many questioning the province's recent years of struggle with identity politics. You have to remember that Quebec has an interesting relationship with race and religion. Back in 2013, the Parti Québécois proposed a charter of values that would eliminate all religious symbols from public workspaces. And while that did not go through and there is a new government, you have to wonder who still supports this. The alleged shooter, 27-year-old Alexandre Bissonnette, held radicalized right-wing views. He is described by people that knew him as a racist fanatic, known to support U.S. President Donald Trump, France's National Front leader Marine Le Pen, and to have anti-Islamic views. But contempt can be contagious. Since Sunday's attack, Montreal police say there's been a spike in hate-related incidents.
Right on this side, you can see behind me the Syrian mountains. On the other side, the Turkish mountains. And there's actually a fence-like wall that you can see that divides the two areas. And of course, it's too dangerous for us to go over to Syria right now. But thanks to technology, we're able to connect with people right over that border.
Steps away, Syrians are scrambling for safety.
700,000.
700,000 people that have moved
IDPs from Hama, from Idlib, from Aleppo, from all of the area to the Turkish border.
It's an informal safe zone from airstrikes. Because if you cross into Turkish airspace, well, you're in trouble. Somalia has declared a national disaster. What is supposed to be lush green farmland looks like this after 2 failed rainy seasons.
People in northern Somalia are largely pastoralists, so they are nomadic and they're caring for cattle and they're constantly on the move. But take a look around me. There's no animals, there are no people, there's nothing out here. And that tells us there's no food or water anywhere in this area. The influx of Iraqi IDPs and Syrian refugees is not just a humanitarian crisis, it's really an economic one. The Kurdistan Regional Government says it's seen a 28% population boom since 2012. So think of all the people that need medical supplies, food, shelter, even jobs. Now this has more than doubled the poverty rate in the KRI. It's also slowed economic growth by 5%. The government says it needs $1.4 billion this year alone to stabilize that economy.
Outside the Kurdistan region of Iraq, the Peshmerga, or Kurdish freedom fighters, are holding off ISIS. Canada has 69 members of the special forces on the ground training these troops. Like many young professionals, Sarah is based in Baghdad. She expected to work in her own dentistry clinic, that is, until she saw the suffering.
When I first came to this camp, it was empty. A day after I came to this camp where it was empty, there was about 10,000 people in this camp.
10,000 in one day.
In one day.
Our correspondent Molly Thomas is back from being in Paris. Molly, tell us about walking the streets there at a time like that.
I would describe it as somber, but at the same time lively. I mean, on the somber side, you can't miss the flowers, the tributes, the pictures that show up at these memorials in District 10 and 11. You walk by, I mean, people, even on their way to work, will just stop and take a moment. But at the same time, it's lively. I mean, part of French culture is to be out at cafes, it's to have a drink on a patio. People are still out and about. And I think the tough thing about talking about France is that Paris is the tourism capital of the world. And so you have, everybody's there. So it's really tough sometimes when you're out in the streets to figure out who's Parisian and who's not, who's affected and who's not. It was quite a sweeping speech, Lorna. Pope Francis addressed more than 100 heads of state in just under 45 minutes. And he had a lot to say to the international community, but at the heart of every single issue that he touched on was this cry for social justice. We look around this camp, I mean, people have set up shops, they've set up businesses.
We hope and pray that the conflict will be over in Syria.
When many people think refugees, they assume that these people are living in refugee camps. But here in Jordan, the majority of Syrian refugees are actually living in host communities like here in Zarqa. Now, the problem with this is that services can be scarce and scattered. The UN says that 2/3 of Syrians living like this are actually in poverty.
You might call the Lady Cougars a dynasty, the kind of team that makes you cringe when you see them on the schedule. A force to be reckoned with in the late 90s. Since 2001 alone, 9 trips to the national championships. That win stems from years of tradition, women that trailblazed the way back in the 70s.
Everything looks different, and they got the long socks. That was
yeah,
the
long
style.
socks, long sleeves.
What the heck are these? I don't know if this is for a child.
No, they're for practice shorts.
A little nickname for you here, Cash Money. Uh-oh. Have you heard that one before? Cashmere.
Did you guys call each other to match this morning?
This just keeps happening, and I don't understand.
How do you look exactly the same? What are the honestly, we need to know.
Warm temperatures, I'm talking 30s. I'll have all those details coming up.
Beach weather.
Oh yeah, get out the Speedo.
Woo! Never the Speedo, Carrie. Never the Speedo. 7:10 this morning. Let's check in with our business dude over at BNN. Michael, of course, called me Dudette in our last hit. So, hey, dude, what's going on?
Well, what I'm looking at, very good. I like you.
You know, some guys just have that thing. I think Robin Thicke has that thing. I don't know. Let's not talk about it anymore.
Okay, then.
Let's go to break. Stay with us.
Back in a second.